Thanks, Ray. A lot to dive into. Let's meet our panel. Also from Honduras is Liana Montecinos, a former dreamer who was able to legalize her status and now helps other undocumented immigrants. And she's a paralegal, and she's also here in our studio. Also with us is Tamar Jacoby. She is president and CEO of Immigration Works USA. From Cleveland, the former president of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, David Leopold, and Michael Johns is the co-founder of the National Tea Party movement, and he joins us from Philadelphia. Welcome to you all. Really glad you could join us. Liana, let's start with you. We saw the case there of a dreamer. Just how precarious is this position that dreamers are in now? Because the status must be driving them crazy.
It's a very precarious situation because the dreamers are risking everything. The dreamers are not allowed to work, not allowed to go to school because they have to pay triple the tuition in most states, and not allowed to work if they don't have status. So it's their life on the line.
David, I want to go to you because the situation is pretty weird for people who aren't used to the U.S. legislative process. But what happened with DACA, the Dreamers Act, is that President Trump basically gave it up, kicked it back to Congress for 6 months, kind of used it looks like a leverage to get his immigration priorities through, the wall we've all heard about, other things as well. But then Congress didn't act because the courts are now involved. What's going on with that, and where are we going to see some sort of breakthrough?
Well, I don't know that I'm going to push back a little bit
Sure.
on the notion that Congress didn't act because of the courts. The courts and the Congress were separate. The courts basically said that Donald Trump had to follow the law if he was going to withdraw DACA, and he didn't do that. He created this crisis. So it's a Donald Trump created crisis with an arbitrary March 5th deadline. And the reason Congress didn't act is because despite Trump's promises and his claim that he loves dreamers, he wanted to exact his pound of flesh out of the immigration system before he was going to agree to even basic rights for dreamers. Okay. He wanted, of course, his wall, and he also wanted to get rid of family unity immigration, a core concept in American immigration.
Well, I mean, thank you very much. Tamar, you wanted to come in on that?
Well, the point is there was an obvious deal, a simple, obvious deal. Could have been DACA and for the wall. But neither side...
So the immigrants get protected, the undocumented immigrants...
The DACA recipients get protected and put some money for the wall. And Trump could have gone home and said, I won, and Democrats could have gone home and said, I won, we protected these DACA recipients. And instead of going for that simple, narrow, not too many moving parts deal, everybody had to add more things. And Donald Trump did it first. He added this family migration piece, which is this huge thing. And then Democrats got greedy too. And they said, well, let's not just protect the DACA people, let's protect all the dreamers. And I mean, you know, I think they should be protected, but there was a small, simple deal, and Congress couldn't just agree on it. They all said we want more.
Michael Johns, President Trump himself has said he loves the dreamers. They're in a precarious position because they were brought here as children through no fault of their own, but have remained undocumented until the DACA process. 2 million undocumented immigrants who are brought here, essentially. What's the solution to deal with the dreamers? Because if the courts rule one way or the other, we could see people being deported, couldn't we?
I don't think it's a top priority right now for ICE or for the administration to deport individuals that were protected under DACA, but it was a monstrous stab in the back for DACA beneficiaries, for the Democratic Party not to have taken what, in essence, was everything they always sought. The protection, not just of the 800,000.
So what would your solution be? What would the solution be from the Trump administration?
Well, you've got the Trump solution, which I think was immensely generous, that should have been accepted. It wasn't. So now it's essentially become a politicized issue that is lingering. But when you break down the actual offer of the resolution, it was precisely what the DACA beneficiaries wanted. It would have afforded a path to citizenship for all of the 800,000 protected under Obama, and then over another million that the president generously threw in. To reject that shows that the Democratic Party continues to use the DACA beneficiaries and the issue generally as a political volleyball for their benefit. And I
Okay.
think it's immensely concerning.
David and Tamar are both shaking their heads vigorously here. David, do you want to jump in quickly?
Yeah, what's conveniently left out there is that Trump wanted to eviscerate the core values in the American immigration system, namely family unity. He wanted to throw that out. He calls it, chain migration, which is a pejorative term. But he wanted to get rid of that. That's a core value in American immigration history and American immigration policy. The wall, the very stupid wall that we don't need, yeah, I think the Democrats would have given him his money for the wall. That wasn't the problem. The problem was you can't trust this president because he kept changing the ground rules as he negotiated, if you want to call that negotiated. And the problem is who's whispering in his ear in the Oval Office are these white nationalists like Stephen Miller, and then you've got Jeff Sessions, and then you've got the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, all of whom have demonstrated their bona fides of anti-immigrant extremism. And what was said at the very beginning of his comments, which were that dreamers are not a priority, I'm sorry, that's just not true. We're seeing undocumented people who've never committed a crime being rounded up and deported out of this country like cattle ever since Donald Trump took the oath of office.
Can we be clear on that?
Can we be clear on that?
Whatever you think of DACA beneficiaries, every DACA person here, every illegal immigrant here, the first act they committed in entering the country was a violation of our laws.
Even if they were 2 or 3 years old, you think that's fine?
Lawless. It's immensely complicating. It's like any juvenile crime in the country. You can't reward the crime. But hold on one second. Hold on one second. We just had an election on this. All right. The president ran on a position that was immensely
and he lost by hardline.
Okay, I don't want to relitigate the 2016 election. Please. Just 1 second, because I want to speak to.
You have a national consensus on
Michael,
this.
love you lots. You're on the show a lot. Please just let other people speak as well. Liana, how do you feel when you're now legalized, but also your contemporaries are sort of battered like this politically? It must be awful to watch.
It's dehumanizing hearing people discuss your future and your livelihood and discuss whether you're going to be deported to a place that you no longer consider home. Even now that I am a naturalized U.S. citizen, I feel for the dreamers, and the fear of deportation still lingers in me, although I'm a U.S. citizen. It's because the process was so traumatizing and so long that I just don't know that I will ever get rid of it, and that's why I continue now to help the dreamers. And to answer your question, it's dehumanizing, and people should realize that when they're discussing these issues, there are people on the line.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because we are talking about individuals here, no matter what side of the fence you are on politically, and people have been here a long time. We had a report from Dan Williams, one of our reporters, about a guy who's really sort of invested in America, employs people. Let's just take a look, because I want to get to your reaction off the bat.
A busy evening in the kitchen of Son of a Butcher, a Chicago restaurant serving American and Mexican food. Owner Rick Rodriguez is also the hands-on chef. He employs dozens of people, but he's in the US under DACA. Rodriguez arrived as an undocumented immigrant from Mexico in 1991 at the age of 5. DACA gave Rodriguez and hundreds of thousands of others a legal status to work and live in the US.
Every month, our taxes are over 20 grand. So you can imagine how much money we're contributing to the economy. So to have somebody say, no, bye-bye. We're providing for the community, we're providing for the economy, why we got to get kicked out?
Rod Rodriguez. Tamar, I mean, this is the ultimate American success story, isn't it?
It's a great story. What a lovely little clip. There are DACA recipients who are in medical school, who we've paid to put through medical school. There are DACA recipients who are teachers. There are DACA recipients who are nurses. Crazy to kick them out. And it's a good little mirror, a good microcosm of the immigrant population as a whole. Immigrants are 13% of the country, and they're 25% of the doctors, and 25% of the nurses, and 25% of the patents, and half of the PhD scientists. Immigrants are great for America. It's a boon we get from the rest of the world to want to cut it in half, as President Trump wants to do. President Trump wants to cut the flow in half. It's suicidal for the country in the long haul.
I want to play this clip. Hang on, Michael. I just want to play this clip from Donald Trump because he has politicized immigration quite greatly, and he did win the election through the Electoral College and all that sort of stuff. But he's really put a lot of emphasis on the criminality of immigrants, especially this gang, the MS-13. Let's have a listen.
If I wanted to pull our people from California, you would have a crime nest like you've never seen in California. All I'd have to do is say, ICE and Border Patrol, let California alone. You'd be inundated. You would see crime like nobody's ever seen crime in this country.
So David, you know, he's talked a lot about sanctuary cities, which of course don't deport undocumented workers, don't work with immigration services to deport and the like. He has talked about Mexicans being rapists, you know, his words, not mine.
Right.
What has that led to, in your belief, in terms of this DACA debate and beyond?
This is part of an ugly ideology. I mean, what they're trying to do, the extremists are trying to criminalize every immigrant, and this is nothing new. By the way, this is out of the playbook of some of the darkest political periods of the 20th century. You know, I'm a son of a Holocaust survivor, so this kind of stuff is very personal to me. And when you take immigrants and you start calling them criminals, despite the facts which show that immigrants commit crimes and are incarcerated at a far lower rate than native-born Americans, by the way, you have something that they put together called the Voice Office at the Department of Homeland Security, which publicizes the crimes committed by immigrants. Forget the fact that they're not at the same rate as native U.S.-born people.
Okay.
That's what the Nazis did. That's what the Nazis did to the Jews in the 30s. They publicized the crimes of Jews in Der Stürmer. This is Julius Streicher's way to, the famous Nazi. That's his way to communicate, and it doesn't...
I understand your point. Just comparing stuff to Nazis and talking about Hitler always gets people nowhere.
But it's a legitimate. Okay. I'm sorry, it's a legitimate comparison. I'm not saying not saying that that the regime at this point is equal to that. That's not what I'm saying.
Thank you.
But the tactics of dehumanizing people are very similar.
Michael, I've got to let you jump in here.
I think it's important not to collectively stereotype the DACA beneficiaries. It's true there are some immensely accomplished, great stories. No, I don't think anyone's disputing that. It's also true that nearly 3,000 DACA beneficiaries were kicked out of the program after criminal convictions. But it would be wrong to extrapolate that all of DACA's members are criminals either. The reality is we have this body of individuals. We want to handle it fairly. We want to acknowledge the fact that we don't want this to be a recurring problem. So to address it in isolation and not secure the borders and address overstayed visas and all of the issues that contributed to it would lead us to a position of simply having this debate again 2 or 3 years down the road. And by the way, historically, if you go back to 1986, we went through the Immigration and Reform Control Act, which was supposed to be the definitive resolution of illegal immigrants in exchange for securing border. The illegals were given amnesty. The border was never secured.
Tamar, I want to put this to you. I mean, it seems that the U.S. has this debate every generation or two. You know, I go back to the 1880s and the Chinese Exclusion Act. You know, there seems to be periods in its history where, you know, for a while, immigration is great. And then immigration is bad, and the foot goes on the gas and the foot goes off the gas. What's caused this?
Well, there has been a very big flow in the last 20, 30 years. And you know, they are reshaping the country, I think, in great ways. And that does give people, after a while, some pause. I think wrongly, but people are worried, you know, their communities do change. They're worried people won't integrate. And they're worried about other things. They're worried about the economy. They're worried about, you know, the robots and automation are coming. And sometimes they take it out on immigrants. But, you know, the point is, to answer Mr. Johnson, you know, the point is that Trump is right that illegal immigration is bad and criminals are something we want to do something about, but they're a tiny minority. And cutting the whole immigration flow in half as a way to, as an exchange for DACA, that's not a fair deal, and it's not a good answer for America. We do want immigration in America's interest. President Trump, that's the truth. We do want that. That's right. But America's interest is not to have half as much.
David?
Well, I agree with that. I think Tamar's right on point. And I think what we also have to understand that this is not about rational, the Trump policy is not about rational immigration policy. It's about cutting out immigration, period. It comes from some of the pages of the most notorious anti-immigrant groups in the country, down to what they call a timeout, zero immigration. You see that in the travel bans. You see that in the quote-unquote extreme vetting, where they're stopping people who are eligible for visas from getting visas, the silent bans overseas. You see that in the refusal to even deal rationally on DACA. I'm sorry, the president did not deal rationally on DACA, and not in a way that he wanted to solve the problem, despite his rhetoric. And I think it would behoove all of us to come to an agreement, because the reality on the ground is you have 1.8 million dreamers, or you have 800,000 plus that have qualified for DACA. They're not, nor they should, be going anywhere but home, which is here.
Okay.
In the United States.
I want to read a tweet from Donald Trump. He talks about how border crossings have come down. 45-year low on illegal border crossings this year. ICE and Border Patrol agents are doing a great job for our country. MS-13 thugs are being hit hard. Liana, do you get a sense from talking to your clients and people that people are more scared to come into this country illegally?
Yes, but people are scared because there is a threat back home. And when they come and
Tell me
seek,
about that, yes.
There's a humanitarian crisis in Central America right now, and it's political in Honduras, and it's also gang-related. And
it's not just MS-13, though,
it's not just MS-13. Okay. You have 18th Street Gang, you have Mau Mau, you have many gangs, and you have political issues. You also have them in El Salvador and Guatemala, which is called the Northern Triangle. Not only that, but when they come to the United States to seek asylum, which under international law, they are allowed to do that.
Refugees?
Yes. They are denied, and so their rights, their international rights, are being violated. And so I think people are scared that when they come to the United States and seek protection for their lives, they're being returned because their rights are being violated. So that's what people are scared about.
And there's sorry, go ahead.
Well, people are deterred by the Trump rhetoric and all the little nips and tucks that the Trump administration is taking that's hostile to immigration. Illegal, less unauthorized immigrants are frightened, but so are authorized immigrants, and so are travelers. I was talking to somebody at one of the big hotel chains. Their Middle East visitors are down by 40% since Trump was president. People don't want to come to America. Those are people who could be doing business here. Those aren't terrorists, right?
Well, it's a great country to come anyway, but you know.
Yes, but I mean, that's the point. The anti-foreigner rhetoric is getting throughout the world, and fewer people want to come, and that is going to be so bad for us in the long run. You know, the guy who invented the Pentium chip, if he'd gone to England or Germany instead, we'd be sorry.
You could name a lot of heads of companies, couldn't you? Michael, the economy's humming along. Lots of immigrants at head of Fortune 500 companies. People are finding it hard to get labor, especially in agricultural states. Why not suit the immigration policy to the economics of the time?
Well, I think that there's a lot of economic reasons, particularly the state of blue-collar America, 90 million Americans that aren't in the workforce, deflated wages. There's essentially been no increase in wages in this country since 2000.
Is that immigrants' fault, or is that?
It's not exclusively immigrants, right, but it is a factor that you can, it's a supply and demand factor that you cannot flood a country with low-wage earners and expect that you're going to have increasing wages that are going to keep pace with inflation. They haven't. The second thing I would point out
isn't
is
the biggest problem robots rather than immigrants, though? I mean, you know, I mean, you could put
it's
no
usually
serious
challenging.
economist can find a wage effect, can find a significant wage effect. The wage effect, the hawks who think there is a big wage effect think it might be 5% over 20 years just for high school dropouts. No one finds a wage effect.
Look, you can find data on this issue all over the place. Let's face it, that it's become a partisan
other
issue.
people's
It's become a
Actually,
partisan
it's not
issue.
all over the place.
I got to, you know.
It's actually not all over the place. Tamar's right.
It is. It is. We have.
This economist who's the most skeptical of immigration in America, George Borjas at Harvard,
Let me be clear.
he thinks that over 20 years, other high school dropouts who represent less than 10% of the workforce, that they have maybe a 5% wage effect. But in fact, it's made up because clothes are cheaper, housing's cheaper, food is cheaper. People aren't hurt by immigrants, they're helped.
Michael?
Yeah.
Okay, we have a legal immigration process. One of the concerns about DACA, which would be now the second amnesty program for illegals, is that we're essentially rewarding them for violation of the law. And I put an asterisk behind that because we all concede that these were younger people, but their parents and others were responsible for moving them in illegal ways. The thing that's most frustrating to American people when they hear a debate like this is all of the passion and emotion, some of which is very justifiable, let me concede that, and that I share, is all regarding the illegal immigrants. Not once have any of you raised the state of Americans, the impact in this country, or the autonomy that exists for us to politically decide how we're going to handle a complex issue of illegality.
I beg your pardon.
To say the president has not handled this quickly.
Mr. Johnson. As I said, Donald Trump is exactly right to say what we need is immigration in America's interest.
Well, and he offered you your 1.8 million. He offered you your 1.8 million. He gave you absolute path to amnesty. The Democrats want to politicize this.
With a ridiculous price.
If you have a problem with the border, if you know that's an issue with you guys placing your objection to border controls over DACA resolution.
Okay, Michael, just let David come in for a second here. And then.
I just want to say, Michael, if you take a second and you read the various credible studies out there, whether they come from the Cato Institute, whether they come from the Center for American Progress,
they're open borders,
whether they come from. Okay, so you don't want to read those studies because what those studies give you that you're not concerned.
I'm aware of them.
Okay, well then you don't like the facts. And the facts are Well, okay, are you done? The facts are that immigration helps economically. Immigration helps American workers. You know, whether you look at either side of the skill spectrum. All right. And the problem is, you know, it's the default is to we have a legal system that people should come in on. The problem is we don't have an adequate legal system for people to come in on. I spend my day in and day out dealing with the legal immigration system. I've devoted my career to legal immigration. And that system is completely dysfunctional and inadequate. It was created basically in the 60s for an America that's now global. It just is not working. What we do need, you referenced the amnesty of 1986. What we do need and what that didn't have was a well-designated temporary worker program. We need to reform the immigration system in a way that helps keeps American jobs, enhances the economy, but it also has a rationally based
Guys, I'm going to have to cut you off there because I want Liana to get the last word. Are you hopeful still that the Dreamers will find a path to citizenship and stay in the United States?
Of course. That's what they're called, Dreamers. Because they work hard and they never give up.
How are they going to get it?
I think the way Dreamers are going to do it is not only by making some policy changes and organizing massively in the United States, but also by being successful themselves. And that's what Dreamers have been really good at doing. They have shown time and time again to the American society that we are contributors not only academically, but also in the workforce. And I think people eventually will see our value, but we also need to mobilize.
Thank you so much. I know it was a heated discussion, but a really important one. And I want to thank all our guests here in the studio and elsewhere as well. Thanks. I really hope you all come back again. That's it, unfortunately, for this edition of The Heat. But the conversation does continue online. Join us on CGTN's Facebook page to comment on this or any other show, or chat with us on Twitter @CGTN America. I'm Nathan King in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much for watching. Appreciate it.